Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, an old farmer gets into a massive conflict with a greedy, entitled homeowner association president. The HOA wants to buy the farmland and offers OP a lot of money. He refuses and afterwards things go south. This is why you never want to mess with a farmer. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. Hey Reddit, so my name is Noah. I live alone primarily as a cattle rancher and livestock farmer out here in what I call the sticks. Or at least it used to be the sticks until about 5 years ago when a group of real estate bigwigs bought out a patch of farmland my neighbor sold when they retired for a new suburban neighborhood they called New Alexandria. And by the way guys, I asked OP if he is a Walking Dead fan and he said yes indeed, because obviously he used a fake name here to not get doxxed on Reddit. Anyway, I dislike the idea of so many new neighbors, and after decades and decades of basically living alone out there, it felt like an invasion of privacy almost, but I got used to it after a while. So fast forward half a decade ahead back to the present now with a neighborhood fully built. That is when all my troubles started with their HOA. My first experience with the local HOA was actually a pleasant one when I was approached one hot summer morning by a stocky gentleman when I was out in the barn. The figure, boasting a shock of frazzled grey hair and a lime green polo shirt stretched smoothly around his plump visage, introduced himself as Glenn, the newly elected president of the HOA managing New Alexandria, though he explained much of this through a series of pauses and short wheezes that suggested a burst of exercise he was not accustomed to. I gave him a chair and a beer and we talked a while before I had to return to work. He wandered off with a stride that suggested he was pleased with the success of his eager diplomatic mission. Admittedly, his visit had also warmed me to the idea of having friendly faces nearby. Maybe it was not gonna be so bad after all. This new friendship seemed to turn sour after he offered to buy my land to expand the HOA. While it sounded like a generous cash settlement, I enjoyed my life out here and I was not ready for it to change just yet, so I turned him down. I tried to refuse as gently as my stern nature allowed, but his face still twisted like I had abruptly slapped him or kicked his dog. He returned a few days later to try and convince me again, but I had no patience for the salesman's speech and asked him to stop. The next time I saw him, we met as adversaries rather than friendly neighbors. When families started moving into the neighborhood, they often stopped by as the kids loved seeing my horses. I indulged them of course, and they eventually got used to us. I had gotten onto such good terms with some of these families that on quiet days, I would ride one of my horses up to their houses to visit, which seemed to never fail at bringing a smile to certain faces. However, one person that never smiled at these visits, however, was Glenn, who from this odd and volatile reaction I could only assume hated horses with an intense passion. He stomped over to me from his yard one morning as I rode down the street on horseback, shouting and waving his arms wildly like a man whose wits had abandoned him. I immediately barked back to warn him against things that might scare the horse, but I could already feel my control of the wavering beast began to wane. He retreated quickly back indoors to his fear. After a few careful minutes, we were calmed down enough to proceed on our procession around the neighborhood. I returned home that evening thinking the weirdest event of the day was behind me, but boy was I wrong. Later that evening, I was lying in bed when I was disturbed by 3 repeated knocks at the front door. I approached with caution, wary of uninvited nightly visitors as I caressed my shotgun. My tensions eased slightly when I opened the door to a police officer that looked just as perturbed by the visit as I did. He calmly explained that he was called out from the nearest city from a very persistent and agitated gentleman from New Alexandria. Although he gave no name, I knew only one that fit the bill. Since the act itself was not a crime, he left with a polite warning but ultimately left a few minutes later. Seemingly, Glenn was not happy with the outcome as he kept his distance for a few days over the week, only occasionally peering behind the safety of his white-red drapes. At week's end, I got a suspicious notice addressed from the HOA offices. In essence, it was a phony restraining order supposedly preventing me from entering the HOA-owned land on horseback due to clauses X, Y, and Z. I ripped it up on the spot and threw the fragile remains into the wind. Maybe he thought a farmer like me would be ignorant or easy to intimidate with the force of the law, but what he did not count on was the fact that I was actually well versed in the local law and the public rights of access. Despite my victory, I decided to stew at home for a few days after, missing my next appointment through the neighborhood in a falsehood to let him think that he had won. So that when I returned, that vengeance would be that much more worth it. Ignoring his words of warning, I returned to the neighborhood to see the children, met with a number of expressions from Glenn, who I imagine was in the middle of having a great day. His face twisted from shock to horror to outrage as he left the sidewalk and stormed back to his house. I did not think too much of it until a sharp gasp from the families nearby alerted me to his return. This time he was sporting a shotgun raised and aimed towards me. Panic erupted around us, Glenn shouted, children cried, and my horse began to teeter uneasily. He demanded me off HOA property with very vocal and violent threats as to what would happen should I disobey. But before I could consider my options, a flash erupted from the gun barrel as he fired into us, almost throwing me off the horse. Adrenaline kicking in, I rose sharply and sprinted up to him while Glenn fumbled with reloading. A well-placed fist to the chin knocked him out cold. I quickly assessed myself and was relieved to find that I was unscathed. Unfortunately, my horse was not so lucky and passed shortly after. Following the incident, a convoy of police cars rushed into the neighborhood and began to canvass the scene, following procedures like finely tuned clockwork, setting a perimeter with a reel of yellow tape, herding curious onlookers away, and assessing whether myself or Glenn were in a stable or otherwise uninjured condition. After lengthy questioning, Glenn was hauled off to the city police station, while I was strongly advised to seek legal counsel. Whether by good or bad luck, because our last conflict was on a Friday, it meant processes halted over the weekend, leaving a bitter Glenn to pay bail or face a short vacation in the county jail while waiting for the court case. Not wishing to make matters worse, I stayed at the farm until our business was resolved. On the Monday, we met, discussed, and argued in court. After a lengthy case, obviously a single Monday was not enough given the type of expensive lawyers Glenn hired, he still ultimately lost and ended up behind bars. I was mourning for weeks over my beloved horse, but ultimately I was glad that this POS neighbor finally got what he deserved. His reputation got ruined, he was booted off the HOA, and I suppose now he can try to build a PIA, aka Prison Inmate Association. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, with all these farmer HOA stories, I really don't understand why some people have to give farmers such a hard time. Farmers are some of the most hardworking people we have in society, and they are absolutely vital for our survival. However, I guess some of these HOA Karens think that the food maybe grows on trees or maybe in the supermarket, and that's why they think they can bully and harass farmers. Either way, if you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments, as that would help me tremendously. The next one is titled Parking Petty Revenge. So I live in a small apartment building with a shared parking garage. It's pretty rare that I actually see any other tenants down there, but recently, as I was about to pull out of the garage, my neighbor was about to pull in. Now, I've always believed the right-of-way goes to whoever is there first, but my neighbor loudly and angrily believed the driver going in gets priority over the driver going out. He decided to make his point by standing outside the garage with the opener, and every time I clicked to open, he would click to close. When I said he was gonna make me late, he laughed and said I deserved it for breaking the rules and that I should just call an Uber. Flash forward to today. This morning I saw him heading to his car as I was taking the trash out. I decided to camp out unseen in my car, garage door opener in hand, and every time it would open halfway, I would stop and reverse it. After about 15 minutes, he parked and walked outside on his phone, I assume trying to get service to call an Uber for himself. After a few minutes, he gave up and got back into his car to give the garage another try. Strangely enough, it kept stopping halfway. I can still hear his screams of anguish and defeat. Edit for clarification, for those debating the etiquette, this is a wide residential road with minimal traffic and there is plenty of room on the driveway to wait. My neighbor was not even there until the garage door was halfway open. Again, it's not like I even pulled out of the garage first, he started closing it on me before either of us had a chance to move. Regardless though, the real point is that his response to the situation struck me as unnecessarily petty, so I responded in kind. The next one is titled Customer Service and Karen. Background, I worked for an internet service provider in Australia called iiNet. We were at the time one of the biggest providers, but crucially we did not own our own ADSL1 network and we only on-sold the ADSL1 service from the biggest provider in the country, Telstra. We also had a policy that an ongoing issue should have a case owner, and I was the case owner for this, which is why I got multiple calls about it. Act number 1, a wild Karen appears. I get a call from Karen. While doing an ID check, she provides me her age, and of course she's in her 40s. Her internet went down. I look at the account and I can see she's got on-sold Telstra service. One thing catches my eye though. Although there are thousands of exchanges, central place your connection goes to, shared by multiple suburbs in the country, and you cannot possibly know them all, I know the one she is on because a few weeks earlier a friend was considering buying a house in the area, and I looked at this one and found that there are no free ports and thus it is impossible to get a new service connected. The waiting list for a new connection was 2.5 years at least. So I ask her to do the troubleshooting steps and she says she does, but I suspect she's just telling me she's doing it to make me go away. Whatever though, nothing I can do about that. We exhaust all the troubleshooting and I tell her there appears to be a line fault. I can send out a technician, but it will take 3 to 5 working days, and if there's actually nothing wrong with the line, she will be charged $200 plus $40. Numbers might be wrong, it was a while back, but it was at least $200 for every 15 minutes of work to cover the technician's time. I play her the disclaimer that outlines this and she says, yeah, I accept, on the recording. I lodge a fault. Act number 2, the fault in our loop. She calls after 2 days sounding annoyed, things are still offline. I tell her it has not been 5 days. So she hangs up. On the 5th day I get the technician's report saying no fault found. Next day she calls, Karen, so my connection is still offline. It's been 5 days, what's happening? Me, well, the technician attended the fault and his report says no fault found. Karen, what's that BS? The internet is clearly down and you need to fix it. Me, I don't doubt that the internet is offline, but the fault does not appear to lie within our area of responsibility. I'd suggest you check out your local equipment. Karen, that's not true. My son is an IT guy and the router is brand new. Me, okay, well, I cannot speak for the state of your equipment, but our equipment appears to be in working order. Incidentally, I just want to make sure to give you a heads up that we'll be placing an incorrect callout fee on your next invoice. Karen, you're lying to me. I didn't see no technicians and now you want to charge me over $200 based on your lies. I won't let that happen. Me, I assure you, the technician attended the reported fault. However, you did not see them because they probably only went to the exchange, which is approximately 4 kilometers away from you. Karen, you're lying to me. I'm not paying the fee. What can I do now? Me, well, if you're adamant that your equipment is not at fault, your only option is to file another fault and send the tech out again. It's fairly rare, but it's not impossible that the technician was wrong. Karen, and then you'll pretend you sent the tech and charge me another incorrect callout fee. Me, we will almost definitely send out another tech, but yes, it's very likely to come back as another NFF, and in that case a further fee is likely. That's BS. I've been with you for 5 years and this is how you treat me. Cancel my service now. I'll go to your competitors. They'll want my money. Me, ma'am, the exchange you're connected to only has Telstra ports and is at 100% utilization. If I cancel your service, you will lose your spot. It's also unlikely any of our competitors will be able to provide you any service at all. You should just transfer your service to the next provider. So-called churn, this will allow her to keep her spot. Karen, don't you tell me what to do, you lying sack of poop. You'll cancel my service now, or I will do everything in my power to have you fired. Now I am pissed off myself. It's a bad situation, but there's no need to take it out on me. I'm trying to help her, and that's her response. Engage my malicious compliance. Me, okay ma'am. Hold on for a moment, I'm canceling your service. Me, okay, cancellation processed. Let me just remind you that the incorrect callout fee is still due. Karen, you won't see a cent of that. Me, noted, but the amount is over collections threshold, so we will send you to collections. Karen, click. Act 3, the joys of the waiting list. About a month later, I get a request to transfer to me. Of course, it is Karen. I take a moment to catch up on her file and the service is cancelled and fee invoiced. I run a quick service qualification on her line and I can see that our service so-called codes have dropped off and there are no other codes on her line. She did not manage to get connected with anyone. Karen, hello? I think I spoke to you last time. Me, yes you did. Karen, my internet is still down and you're still charging me for the fee. I need you to get rid of it. Me, I cannot do that. The charge is valid. Karen, well, I cannot pay it. You've ruined my business. I was operating an e-commerce business and that won't be possible anytime soon. Running a business over residential connection is a breach of customer service agreement, but I let that slide. Me, I'm sorry for your predicament, but the fee stands. Karen, I'll do you a deal. If you reconnect my service, I will pay the fee. Me, I can probably sign you up again even though you're behind on payment. I was not lying to you when I told you that there are no ports on your exchange. Also, it's very unlikely you would get a port, they are all in use. Did you try with our competitors as you said you would? I did. None of them would even try signing me up because they told me they couldn't provide a service. Me, we are in the same situation. Karen, why can't you just give me back my old port? Well, because it was given to the first person on the waiting list. Karen, and how long does the waiting list take? Me, last time I checked more than 2 years. Karen, this is ridiculous. I'm going to the TIO, Telecommunications Industry Ombudsman. Me, you may do so, as is your right, but be very clear, we will substantiate the validity of our fee. Karen, whatever. Click. Conclusion, she did in fact file a complaint with TIO, and I handed her case over to a TIO complaint specialist. I made sure to point out that she was breaching TOS with business over residential service. TIO obviously ruled in our favor and we were allowed to send her to actual collections. Before I left the company though, about a year and a half later, I caught up on her file and she had filed a loss of business claim, which was summarily closed because residential connections do not have service level agreement. Last contact was her speaking to our credit team, asking them to make sure they mark her debt as paid with our collections people and make sure this is reflected on her credit rating. There were still no codes on her line and it's quite unlikely she got any reasonably priced service connected for at least 2 years. Realistically longer, as demand only ever went up. And the next one is titled, Sold my car, new owner tries to make me pay over $2,000 in fees. So when I was in college, I bought an old 1974 Mercury Comet with the intent of fixing it up because I loved older cars. However, due to being a broke college kid, I eventually realized that I bit off more than I could chew and started looking to sell the car. Pretext, my apartment had one street where everybody could park if they didn't pay extra for a private parking space and I couldn't afford to have a private spot, so this is where I parked. Since the street was a public street, they had a rule where you couldn't leave your car parked in the same spot for more than 72 hours or else the car was technically abandoned and they had the right to tow it. Now, I had problems with this rule since I had gotten the car. Most of the time this rule is pretty much ignored as everyone parking here either lives in the apartment complex or they were parked there because it was the closest free parking area to my university and all the cars just blend in with each other. The problem with my car was that it stuck out like a sore thumb, being from 1974 and admittingly looked like it could not even start. I had gotten a decent amount of fines and tickets from them, but was always able to contest and win because I could prove I lived on the street and I always made sure I moved it to the other side of the street every 2 to 3 days so they legally couldn't tow it. Safe to say, every time the cars on my street were checked, they kept an eye out for mine to give some BS reason as to why they could ticket or fine me. They really didn't like me. Fast forward to selling my car. It took a while to find somebody to sell the car to, but after a couple months I finally found a buyer. He was a little older than me, but not by much. I was only getting $1,500, which sucked because I paid closer to $2.5K for the car, but I thought I got my money's worth of driving around and was just glad to get something for it. He told me he couldn't pay all at once and wanted to know if we could do a payment plan for the car, which I agreed to because I just wanted the car gone, and so I wrote up a contract with everything detailing the sale in it, which he signed, I signed, and a witness, his friend who happened to come help him with the car, also signed. I got $500 in cash and then a few days later the car was gone, so that was the end of it, or so I thought. Fast forward a few weeks later and I got a letter about the car. The car had been towed and was still in my name because I completely forgot to do a title transfer when I sold the car and had how much I owed at the bottom for the storage in the tow yard. Almost $2,000. I checked the date it was towed and it had been towed a couple days after I made the sale because the buyer never took the car. What also confused me was that it had been weeks and the buyer never said anything to me asking about the car and where it was. So I messaged him and tried to call him letting him know what happened. He didn't get back to me until 6 days later asking where it got towed to and if the car was still there. I gave him the info and he called the company to ask how much the total cost for the car was now. It had gone well over 3K, and I then got a short message back that says, "Yeah bro, it's too much, it's already at over 3K. I would rather just get my 500 back." I'm sorry? The F? I get a hold of him and basically tell him he's not getting his money back and that this is on him. He shouldn't have left the car there for days, which I warned him about before he bought the car. He proceeds to tell me, "Look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way." To which I tell him he's not getting his money back and he needs to pay the towing company to get the car back. He immediately hangs up and sends me a message that says, "I will see you soon." I, a 20-year-old college student who has never dealt with anything regarding the law, is now freaking out because the new buyer basically said F you while I am sitting here with an ever-increasing bill of over $3,000 in my name. Then I remember something, the signed contract that 3 people signed, the revenge. So I find the contract in a folder in my closet and immediately take pictures of it just in case I would need them, and then call the towing company to explain everything. The guy is super nice and at first tells me I might be completely screwed as I never sent in a title transfer to the DMV. However, once I bring up the contract, he says, "Oh, you have a signed contract from before the car was towed? That's great, you should be fine as long as you send a title transfer indicating the sale date with the contract as proof to the DMV. I found out you can do one completely online, and once I sent it in, I didn't get any more messages from the towing company. However, I did end up calling the towing company a few weeks later to make sure I was in the clear, and what he told me was glorious. So the buyer did not pick up the car for a while, so it continued to accrue more and more in fees until it reached over $4,000. But that is not even the best part. The best part was him telling me that after a certain amount of days, the car gets auctioned off if it hasn't been picked up, and the owner of the car still has to pay all of the fees for the car for storage. By the time the guy who tried screwing me $2,000 finally called to pick up his car, the towing company made sure to get all his information, name, address, etc. first, and then let him know that the car was already auctioned off, and then slapped him with around $4,500 in storage and towing fees. I couldn't be happier. Oh, and if the buyer who tried to screw me is reading this, go F yourself.